was light. And from this light, God created life upon earth. And man was given dominion over all things. And man was given the power to choose between good and evil. But everyone did as they pleased because they didn't know the light of God's law. Man took command over man. The conquered were made to serve the conqueror. The weak were made to serve the strong. And freedom was gone from the world. So it came to be that the Egyptians commanded the children of Israel to serve as slaves, and their lives were made bitter with hard work and little compassion. And their cry was heard by God, and when God heard them, he put a plan into action. He made it that into Egypt, into the lowly hut of Amram and Yocheved, a child would grow. This child would become a man upon whose mind and heart would be written God's law and God's commandments. One man to stand alone against an evil empire. Our story begins long ago in Egypt with the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. God's people, the Israelites, were his slaves, but the Israelites had grown in numbers so much that the Pharaoh was now afraid of them. This Pharaoh devised an evil plan. He ordered all Israelite babies to be thrown into the Nile because, you see, in Pharaoh's time, only boys could grow up to be soldiers and leaders of armies. So he would kill the boys, he would keep the girl babies to grow up to be slaves. The moms who would make more babies who would grow up to be slaves too. But God had another plan. To his horror, that Pharaoh created a certain mother, gave birth to a son, and she was determined that her boy would live. She hid him for 3 months until one day...
Open up! Coming! Come on, open up! Coming. If it's about the loud music, I can explain. Never mind. May God guide you.
As it would happen, the Pharaoh's young widowed daughter and her handmaiden are frolicking on the shores of the Nile.
Uh-oh, go fetch that bathroom. Listen. Oh, it's a Hebrew baby. You may approach. Oh, he's cute. Will you be needing a nurse maiden for him? Yes. I don't trust the woman.
This was phase 1 of God's plan. Moses was saved, and Yocheved got to have her baby back until he was weaned. She was able to teach him about God and Hebrew ways. Growing up in the palace, Moses was treated like one of the Pharaoh's own family. This meant that he received a fine education and was trained to be a leader. This was part of God's plan too. As Moses grew up, he knew that the Hebrew people were being forced to work very hard as slaves of the Egyptians. Moses did what he could to make things better, But it was never enough until one day he interrupted a guard mistreating the poor, tired, overworked Hebrew slaves.
Get up!
None of your business. I'm Pharaoh's grandson. Just back off.
Moses was shocked and dismayed that the guard didn't listen to him. After all, he was Pharaoh's son. Push came to shove, and before Moses knew what was happening, the guard had drawn a blade and meant to use it. Luckily, Moses was quick and diverted the dagger, or he was lucky. Moses looked over the lifeless body of the fallen guard and realized he had taken a life. The slaves urged him to flee, but though the slaves who witnessed the altercation urged Moses to flee, Moses was confused. Wouldn't Pharaoh understand? Wouldn't Pharaoh, his father, make allowances? And then a stranger approached and made it all the difference.
Run quick. Pharaoh will kill you. Here, take this. Go.
Why?
Pharaoh will kill you.
No, he won't. I'm his grandson.
You're not his grandson. You're not his family. You
Yes,
have
I
other
am.
family. Don't you remember me? I'm your brother.
No.
Here, just go. Take this.
No.
Go.
You are no longer the Prince of Egypt.
You are now the Prince of the Desert. Now leave!
Moses made his way across the desert, nearly dying of hunger and thirst. And he came to a well in the neighboring land of Midian. After drinking and eating dates from a nearby palm tree, he stretched out behind some shrubs and slept. Soon he was awakened by the sound of sisters watering their flocks. Moses peeked around to see what he could see. Just then some bullying Amalekites approached and pushed the girls aside. Moses quickly jumped to the aid of the woman and thrashed the Amalekites soundly with his staff, forcing them to wait their turn at the well. The sisters were surprised and pleased with Moses' help and took him home to meet their father. Moses found a home in Midian with the girl's father Jethro, a Bedouin sheik. Moses married Jethro's eldest daughter called Zipporah. He lived happily with Zipporah in the land of Midian. Raised two sons, leading a peaceful and contented life for many years. Back in Egypt, however, his people were still slaves. They longed to be free. The old Pharaoh whom Moses had known had died, and a new Pharaoh now ruled the country. The new Pharaoh was a proud, harsh ruler. One day Moses was minding his sheep as they grazed on the slopes of Mount Sinai. He saw a bush that seemed to be on fire. The bush was ablaze with light, yet strangely, it was not all harmed by the flames. Moses sat and watched it for a while because something wasn't right. The bush was completely on fire, but it wasn't burning up the bush. Moses decided to get closer to take a better look. As he approached the bush, a voice came from inside of it.
Moses! Moses! Moses!
I am here.
Stop and take off your shoes, for this is sacred ground.
Who is it that speaks?
It is I, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Your people are still suffering in Egypt. While you enjoy a pleasant life in Midian, you must go back to Egypt and persuade the new Pharaoh to give the Hebrew slaves their freedom.
Pardon me, God, but I think you're talking to the wrong person. This is just me, Moses. I'm just a regular guy. Pharaoh won't listen to me.
I will be with you, and I will help you. So go to the Israelites and tell them I've sent you, and I have heard their prayers, and will send them to a better place. Don't worry, they will listen to you, but be patient because Pharaoh won't listen until he sees many signs and it is punished. But after that, he will let you go.
But this is a very difficult task. I'm getting old and I am not a good speaker. Why would you choose me to do this difficult thing?
I have chosen you for good reasons. I will send your brother Aaron. In fact, he is already on the way to see you. I will help both of you and give you the words to say.
But this new Pharaoh is a proud and stubborn ruler. Even if I tell him that you have sent me, he will probably not agree to do what I ask. He will need to do something to show him your marvelous power, something to make him respectful.
Put your hand inside your robe and draw it out.
It's diseased.
Put your hand inside your robe and draw it out again.
Moses was satisfied. He agreed to do what God had asked, and soon he set out for Egypt, where he was met by his brother Aaron. Moses was welcomed back by his people, who were overjoyed to hear his plan to lead them to freedom. He and Aaron soon arranged a meeting with the Pharaoh.
Why have you come here?
God has sent me to free the slaves. They have worked very hard for a long time, but now they should go to another land where they can pray to their own God and live in peace.
I am more powerful than your God. I can do whatever he can do.
Moses was expecting his question and reply. He turned his rod into a terrifying snake and then back into a rod. But this wondrous feat did not impress the Pharaoh. When Moses did this, he just made the slaves work harder than ever. The slaves became very angry at Moses, blaming him for their hard work. Moses and Aaron went back to Pharaoh. They pleaded and pleaded with Pharaoh, begging him to let the Israelites go. Pharaoh did not change his mind.
I will never let the Hebrew slaves go. I don't obey your God. Leave me now. Get out of my sight.
First, God changed all the water in Egypt into blood. All the fish died, and a bad smell covered the land. And the Egyptians could no longer drink the water, and all the thirsty Egyptians became ill. After a week of this, Pharaoh still wouldn't let the people go. So God sent frogs everywhere. Frogs were hopping. It was impossible to walk, as frogs crowded under and into every boot and shoe. After a day of this, Pharaoh begged Moses to pray to God to take the frogs away, promising. But once the frogs were dead, Pharaoh was relieved, and he hardened his heart and wouldn't let the Israelites go. There were many plagues that followed. Gnats, flies covered every surface. They buzzed around Pharaoh's head. All the cows and goats and horse died. There was no milk and to drink or oxen to plow the fields. The Egyptians were covered in sores. They itched and scratched till it drove them crazy. Hail came down, breaking limbs from trees, killing all the crops, leaving nothing for harvest, nothing to eat. Bolts of lightning set barns, fields, and houses on fire. Locusts came and devoured all that was left of the Egyptian crops. Never had anyone seen so many locusts. Soon there was not a single blade of grass or green herb to be found in the fields, not even a single leaf left on any tree. Still the Pharaoh would not let the people go. Then God sent darkness, total darkness. Nobody left their homes because they couldn't even see where they were going. They tried to light their lamps, but with no success. Every flame and fire had gone out. Pharaoh still refused to let the Hebrews go. You may have felt sorry for the Israelites during all of these plagues, but God made sure they were not touched by them. Only the Pharaoh and his people, the Egyptians, were through these terrible times. The Israelites lived a little ways away and God kept them safe and put a retaining wall around them so none of the plagues could come to them. But God's patience with Pharaoh was at an end. If you thought all the other plagues were bad, there was one last plague, the 10th plague. That was way worse than all the others. This plague would destroy every firstborn animal and child belonging to the Egyptians. But first he warned Moses to tell the Hebrews to smear the blood of a lamb on the sides and tops of the doorways of their houses. So the angel of death would see this sign and pass over the house without killing, but all of the houses without blood, The angel of darkness will visit and kill the firstborn. The next morning, that was not a single Egyptian household that had not suffered at least one death. Pharaoh could have stopped all this a long time ago. God gave him many opportunities to let the Israelites go, but he would not listen. And fortunately, God had to teach Pharaoh a lesson, and he did what he said he would do. Pharaoh realized what happened in Egypt. He called for Moses and Aaron, and grieving over his own dead son, agreed at last to let the Hebrew slaves go.
Leave us in peace.
So the Israelites and their families, led by Moses and Aaron, set out at last on the road to freedom. God led them each day. He led them by a pillar of cloud, and each night he led the way by a pillar of fire. Finally, they arrived at the edge of the Red Sea. On the other side of the sea lay freedom. In the meantime, Pharaoh and his advisors had decided they had made a great mistake, letting the slaves go free. Suddenly, he realized how valuable the Hebrews' work had been. He ordered his army to go after Moses and Aaron and all the Israelites. Pharaoh's army set off after the departing Israelites to their alarm. The Hebrews now saw Pharaoh's army behind them and the sea ahead of them.
What have you done to us? At least in Egypt we were safe. Have you brought us all this way just to get us killed?
But Moses' faith in God would save them. When the Israelites reached the Red Sea, they were trapped, with the sea in front of them and Pharaoh's army behind them. But God had a plan.
Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea, and the waters will be divided. You and your people will be able to walk on dry land right through the middle of the sea.
As soon as Moses raised his rod, a great wind blew out of the east. The wind divided the waters of the Red Sea, leaving a path of dry earth between the high walls of water on either side. When they reached the other shore, the people turned back to see how closely the Pharaoh's army was following them. To their astonishment, they saw the waters crash back down upon the Egyptians. Every Egyptian soldier had drowned, but all the Hebrews had been spared. That was the day the Lord saved the Israelites from the Egyptians. When they saw what God had done for them, they trusted him, and they knew that Moses would be a good leader for them as they traveled to the land flowing milk and honey. Moses' sister Miriam and the other woman took up their tambourines and began to dance for joy.
And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one whom we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced the whole night long. And Miriam was a weaver of unique variety. The tapestry she wove was one which sang our history. With every strand and every thread she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the...
After trekking through the wilderness for 3 months, the Israelites are camped at the foot of Mount Sinai. On the 3rd day, thunder was heard over the mountain. Everyone went out to look, and just over the mountain there was lightning and thunder, and a very thick cloud hung over the mountain, so you couldn't see the top. Even the mountain shook, and the sound of the shofar could be heard getting louder and louder. Moses assembled the Israelites and told them God was calling him to come up the mountain. He had something important to tell them. Moses told the Israelites to get ready, have baths, and put on their clean clothes. By doing this, the people are getting prepared to hear important words from God. So Moses went up the mountain to hear from God once again. He stayed for 40 days and 40 nights. God really had a lot to tell Moses and the Israelites. God wanted to give the people instructions on how to live. He knew that if they followed his rules, they would have less sadness in their lives. God just wanted to protect them. When the Israelites saw that Moses was gone for so long, they became restless.
Where is Moses? He said he'd be back.
I don't know. He's been gone so long.
I don't think he's ever going to be back.
So where is Moses? We can't even be sure Moses will ever come back.
Calm down. He will be back as soon as he is finished.
Aaron had no answer for the Hebrews, so he had to do what they asked. The people collected their gold jewelry and other gold objects. Then they melted the metal down and made from it a golden calf. When the Hebrews saw the golden calf, they rejoiced. When the Lord saw this, he was very angry.
Go down at once. Your people have already broken my commandments. They have made a golden calf and are praying to it, saying it's their God, the one who brought them out of Egypt. I have watched these people, and I have seen that they are stubborn. Now I want to be alone, so that I may destroy them, and then I will make a better nation for your children.
If you destroy the children of Israel now, what will the Egyptians think? Pharaoh will say, look, their God led them out of Egypt so he could destroy them in the desert. Please, Lord, remember your promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and not to destroy the people of Israel.
The Lord was touched by Moses' words and decided not to destroy the Israelites. Then Moses left him carrying the 2 stones on which God had written the 10 Commandments. As he hurried down the mountainside, Moses could hear the laughter and singing grow louder. He came near the camp and saw the people dancing wildly. Finally, in the center of their dance, he saw the idol of the golden calf. Moses was so furious that he yelled at the people, then raised the stones that God had given him and smashed them to the ground.
How could you let the people do such a thing?
Don't be angry with me. You know how these people are. When you were gone so long, they asked me to make a new God, and I had to do it.
Let all who are on Lord's side come to me. You have done a terrible thing, praying an idol. Perhaps, though, if I could go to the Lord and ask him, he will forgive you.
So Moses climbed the mountain and again spoke with the Lord and asked him to forgive the Israelites. And God agreed, and the Lord came down in a cloud and stood with Moses, who bowed to the ground.
I will keep your promise and lead your people to the land. I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob a land flowing with milk and honey. If your people will keep my commandments, I will perform miracles for them that they have never been seen before. I will drive out of the people who live in this land, and everyone will see the things and be amazed.
Moses stayed with the Lord 40 more days and wrote the 10 Commandments on the 2 stones he had brought. Then he returned to the Israelites carrying the 2 stones and gave his people God's law.
I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You should have no other gods before me. You must not make idols nor worship them. When you say my name, say it with respect. Work for 6 days and keep the seventh day as a holy day of rest. Always treat your mother and father with respect. Do not murder any human being. Husbands and wives must be faithful to each other. Do not steal. Do not tell lies. Do not be envious of the things that other people have.
The Israelites repented, determined to do their best to live according to God's law, but because of their discretion and according to God's plan, they wandered the desert for 40 more years. At last, it was time. They had been so long in the desert, but here they were God's chosen children, all set to cross the Jordan River into the land God had promised them years before through Abraham. But Moses could not enter the promised land. He was a faithful servant of God, and God requested him to tell the Israelites that the time had come for them to enter the land. God permitted Moses to climb up on a very high mountain called Nebo and up to one of its highest peaks called Pisgah. From this height, he looked across the river Jordan and saw the wonderful land of promise on the other side. And now, after 40 long years of wandering in the wilderness and living in tents, the Israelites were finally in the promised land.
Yes.
You ready?
Oops.
Just pick it up and keep tussling. Are you listening to me? Okay.
Do you want the
But first, Moses, we're filming here.
I can't believe you brought us out here to die. Or something like that. I don't know what to do.
Would you ask Mando to wash his face? He needs his nose wiped. Okay, go.
And now I need you loud, Austin, like you're mad at your brother.
Help, Moses, what have you done to us?
Oh, you can do better than that. Loud.
Help, Moses, what have you done to us? You are no longer the prince of the desert.
No.
Says you are no longer the prince of the desert. You're
And I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lech ilach, to the place that
Isaac. Oh, there you go.
Isaac.
Moses, your Lord is speaking. Isaac.
L'simchat chayim. Lech lecha, to a place you do not know. Lech ilach, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be